If you're a high-achieving woman who's exhausted by stress, stuck in constant conflict, and tired of being overlooked in the exact rooms where you know you were born to lead, then this podcast is for you. So here's your host, Pallavi Jain.
What if self-care wasn't something you did after work, but how you worked better? We live in a culture where high-achieving leaders are praised for pushing through, holding it together, and being endlessly driven. But behind the scenes, many are exhausted, overthinking, and quietly burning out while still showing up strong on the outside. Today's conversation is about a powerful reframe. Self-care is not fluffy, it's not selfish, and it's definitely not a reward for when everything else is done. Self-care is a mindset. One that gives us back agency, clarity, and the ability to perform consistently without living in survival mode. I'm joined by Jeanette Bronee, author of The Self-Care Mindset, 3 times TEDx speaker, a global keynote speaker, and a cultural strategist whose work helps leaders and organizations unlock their human advantage in an AI-driven world by rebuilding trust from the inside out. As the creator of Power Pausing and Care OS, her operating system framework, Jeanette equips teams to shift from high pressure to high functioning by strengthening the invisible infrastructure of performance. Welcome to her boss brain, Jeanette, and Happy New Year. How are you?
Thank you very much. And here we are kicking off another year. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and see how maybe we can rethink how we do in the next year.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to have this conversation. And with your permission, I want to actually start by reading something from your book that stopped me in my tracks. Okay, so here we go. She says, we think of self-care as a side hustle, something we do after work to recover. But what if we thought of self-care as how we work better so we're not forced to recover? We think of self-care as something we do when we have time, but what if we thought of self-care as giving us time back because we spent it better? We think of self-care as a list of perfect habits to do, but what if we thought of self-care as a mindset we carry with us 24/7 that helps us reclaim agency and our work-life quality? And we think of self-care as something we do alone. But what if we thought of self-care as the key to building a better and healthier culture? Oh my God, Jeanette, this isn't just beautiful. It's like deeply practical, and it directly impacts productivity, resilience, communication, relationships, and of course, culture. I am so excited to unpack this with you today. Thank you for joining us, really. So,
well, I'm excited to have the conversation and that we can think of how we do work and life in a little bit of a different way.
Absolutely. So let's start there. Why not? If there's one thing people misunderstand or underestimate about your book or about even self-care mindset in general, what is it?
We've grown up in a culture, a society where the idea of self-care has been monetized into something that costs money. It's time out, it's something to do in our own time, it's a treat, and all those kinds of things. But essentially, I think of self-care not as the habits or the treatments or the things we do that we have to take time out for. But as you were also saying in the introduction, it's a mindset that we're actually running in the background all the time. And that mindset is more about our relationship with ourselves. And that is what I think of self-care as. What is the quality of the relationship we have ourselves? Do we think of ourselves as we trust ourselves? Do we have confidence in ourselves? Do we think we matter? Are we worthy? All things that can undermine how we show up in our relationship with others. So I don't think of it as separate. I actually think of it as interconnected. So even though it says self, it's about how every experience we have actually starts with how I engage with myself, affects how I engage with you, and it impacts how we show up together, which is why I don't think of it as separate from work or life. It is integral part of it. It's at the core of it. That's how I think of it.
I love that self-care, and it makes so much sense. It is an integration, right? Because we don't live in silos, we don't think in silos. Everything comes together, and that's how we integrate that into our life. But why do you think this misconception is so persistent, though, and especially among high performers? Is this like culture conditioning? Is it like what people expect from us? What is it?
I think it's partly because of this idea that it's so basic that once we start naming it, we started creating some of it. We created meaning out of it. And the self-care industry has certainly created a business out of it. I think it's a multi-billion-dollar business right now. If you Google self-care, it's skincare and hygiene and all kinds of other things. The integral relationship with self, we have been a little bit stuck in a mental model that is based on survival mode. And during the Industrial Revolution, we tried to keep up with the machines. And so we're stuck in that mental model of keeping up. Hence, we've landed in the hamster wheel of just do more to valued and to be part of it, to win, to all of the program, the conditioning that we have lived under for a long time because of the paradigm of work that work has been for a long time. And thankfully, we're into a new paradigm. We have to, because of AI and technology, we actually have that. What does it mean to be human? And what is the power of being human rather than thinking we're a problem to fix? I actually think of being human as a true advantage to, as I call it, unlock and harness. But it is a sense of having felt like we were inferior to the process of work. And I think a lot of times we have grown up in this idea that many people, and I do believe that we don't all have the opportunity to thrive. It would be great if we could, but I also think that thriving means something different to everyone. And when I was young and first started out, they sent me to the warehouse to pack porcelain cups because I was working for a porcelain company for Royal Copenhagen in Denmark. And I was starting on the marketing team, but they were like, nope, you go to the warehouse. Because if you don't know how to get the product out of the door, the marketing campaign might be worth nothing. And so I was very upset and angry about it. And I have to say, it completely changed my mind, and I loved it because one of the things I saw was everybody coming together for the same purpose, everybody helping each other. And there was a culture there that happened in the coffee break that really just bonded people together. And I felt like I had 25 new friends or however many people we were in that group. And so we can thrive. It just means different things to everyone. And we've glorified this idea of thriving as something bigger than it is. And it might be something really just daily small joys or relationships.
Wow, that's just so fundamental, but you're so right. Sometimes simple things are very hard to get. And that's what I feel like. We feel that it's something glorified and something big, and how like maybe one person may see that's how they thrive in their life may be very different than what the other person. So I think that's very important and critical to point out that self-care mindset or the thriving mindset or where you're happy and joyful and fulfilled may mean different things through different people. Yeah. And you brought a very important conversation and mentioning of AI, because I think there also I'm seeing that shift and there's almost a divide where some people are really, again, paranoid about AI coming in and that's going to take my job. What you mentioned about the Industrial Revolution, and there was this panic that we have to stay stronger or even be better than the machines. Whereas there is some segment who see AI as a great partner to actually make their life better. But I honestly and that's from my work perspective, from the Lead From Within, when you have that inner anchoring, and I feel like these are tools, but if we are not upgrading the user who is using the tools, right? I think that's where we need to focus rather than worrying about the tools. But because at the end of the day, they are tools that we could use to our advantage. No? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that, right? That's why it's a mindset, right? It is that mindset that says, No, actually, I need to understand how I can contribute better and what do I need so I can do that. So one of the things I always say, the most simple question we can ask ourselves is, what do I need right now so that I can, whatever it is that we're facing?
Yes.
And when we ask that question, we change how we find the answer. But too often we look for the answers.
Yep.
Why am I not able to do this? Why is this not working? Why can't I keep up? So we're asking the wrong question, what I call the pothole question.
Yeah.
And so when we're asking that question because we're in that fear-driven mindset, you can argue, my tool is called power pausing. And so you can argue that's a tool, but it's a shift of the mental model that is, I'm not able to, I can't do it, to what do I need so that I can do it? Maybe it is possible for me to do it. And maybe I just need to ask for what I need so that I can get whatever tools or support or insight or what it looks like right now.
Yes.
And I think that's the opportunity we have is it starts with ourselves, but it also relates to how a leader is asking questions of people, right?
Yes.
My mentor always used to say, don't ask people why something isn't done. Ask them what they need so that they can get done. Now you're having a different conversation.
Yeah, it's all about the framing, right? And being curious to really find out what the answer is. I love that. And now, Jeanette, because we have so many people who are watching this and they're part of our core audience is also our managers who feel caught in the middle, pressure from above, emotional responsibility to their teams, and very little control, honestly. And I know you work with a lot of organizations. So how does a self-care mindset help these managers navigate this invisible emotional labor, so to say? Do you have any tips for them, or what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. I think the whole sort of well-being, the way we started out thinking about in the waste, I think actually was a little too much like the self-care.
Yes.
We thought of it as a treat, something extra, rather than thinking of well-being as social relationships, because that's actually the foundation for our emotional, mental, social health. And so those are the first things. Again, we thought of well-being as an activity. You went off to yoga, you had a chair massage, whatever. I think we started off on the wrong foot, right? But that was because we were borrowing it from the self-care paradigm, which again was also starting off on the wrong foot. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of leaders also thought of, especially we saw that during the pandemic, where a lot of leaders thought of, it's my responsibility to care for my people.
Yeah.
Nope, it is not. It is your responsibility to care about your people. And caring about your people is a conversation. Because if you care for people, yes, you might be where you're in a hospital, you care for people. But if you don't care about people in the hospital setting as well, you don't actually have healing that people need to feel that they matter. Because that is proven that if people feel cared about, they heal faster. And one of the things that I learned, like the way this really came up for me, was when my father was dying and I was his caregiver.
Yeah.
And I was running around, taking care of the house, making sure he had food, making sure he got to the bathroom when he needed it, like all of the stuff that you need to do to care for someone. And he said to me, listen, I appreciate everything you do, but it's not that important for me beyond being comfortable. What's important to me is that I know you care about me. Come over here, hold my hand, sit down and talk to me.
That's the most beautiful thing.
That changed the way I see the world.
Oh my God, that just struck something in me. And I have to re-quote you here because for our listeners, it's such a profound thing you just mentioned. Again, something's very simple, but we just don't get it, right? Caring about your people is different than caring for your people. Caring about your family is different than caring for your family. Oh my God, that's just golden nugget right there. If we can even just remember that. And I sometimes reframe that, and I have noticed that in my own life, Jeanette, where I've shared some stories here with my audience. But when you shift also from what all you're doing to how you're doing it. I think it's the same paradigm shift, but you're still thinking from your perspective, not from the other person's perspective, how they're receiving it. But your own energy changes when you're not focused on what all you're doing. I've cooked, I've done all these activities I'm doing, but how am I doing it? With what intention, with what energy, what am I bringing into this conversation? So it's that when you change that framing, it just, you see it clearly, which you didn't see before. So I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And it must be really hard. I know you and I have talked about it with your dad, the whole, how that changed your mindset and how, you're taking that legacy forward and helping so many more others seeing that perspective, which I truly admire and respect you for. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. It was so profound for me to recognize the power of conversation. Because when he was dying, he was also receiving letters from people that said, the conversation you had with me back so-and-so made me rethink only my life per se, but how I am as a leader. And my dad had conversations with CEOs. They was very high level people. And what always struck me was that they also cared about people. Of course they did, but they didn't know how. We don't know how we show that we care about people in the workplace. And that's where this whole idea of being able to have the conversations and learning the framework for having conversations, which is part of my care framework. And is like, how do we show we care? Of course we care about people. But then we're misunderstanding it to caring for people, which is actually taking agency away from people.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And I know you mentioned power pausing and care. So let's dive deeper here to tell people exactly how to do this, because I think many times we also know this is the right thing to do, but we just don't know how to do it because we're stuck in our own conditioning and how we have seen other leaders, other people behave with us, and we start reflecting the same to others in our life. So you introduced the idea of power pausing. So can you share a real moment in your life, and you've shared one, or leadership journey where pausing changed the outcome? And what shifted internally for you or a leader who you was working with? Anything that you can share for our listeners to really see the power in that.
I think the real moment where I learned the power of pausing was I was working with my dad and taking care of him, because I recognized that I was in my assumption and I was in my idea of what it looked like to take care of him. And then he forced me to pause. But actually, throughout my entire life, he would actually stop me and say, "What are you chasing? What's wrong with this moment? What are you trying to achieve?" And he would pause me when I was most anxious and ask me more questions, so that I actually started cultivating a relationship with this idea that I had in my head and actually asking questions. It was actually true. He would often say that, is that actually true? But I didn't realize until much later that what he was teaching me was to pause. And he didn't call it power pausing. He just called it, let's just make sure we're doing, he always said, do it right the first time. Right? Do it right the first time, because that takes pause, right?
Yes.
But later, what I've seen is a lot of times, for example, I worked with cybersecurity teams where they have so much pressure to act fast.
Right.
But if they act fast in the wrong direction, it might not solve the right problem. And so what I hear from them is that just that moment, pause and recognize that not only do we need the nervous system to just calm down for a moment, which is the first power pause. There's 3 stages. So the first part is pause, that just pause the nervous system. Because when you're running on the automatic survival mode, which you know from a neuroscience, cortisol is hijacking our mind. And as I normally say, we're only looking for the pothole. We're only looking for what's wrong. And so in security especially, you have to look for what's wrong. But if you get stuck in what's wrong, you might solve the wrong problem. So what you need also is the second power pause that says, what are the emotions that are coming up in me? And how can that as data? How can I use that as information? I call it the FUD. So we're getting stuck in the pothole of FUD, and the FUD is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And again, if we are in that motion of being reactive based on emotions, we're not going to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
And that second stage of power pausing is to actually settle in and say, what's driving me right now? Is it fear? Is it uncertainty? Is it doubt? Which means I'm going to try to fix a pothole rather than actually figure out what is it that I need so that I can get past the pothole or solve the right problem. And that's that next stage of power pausing where we're getting into that more cognitive part of the mindset and the brain, which you also know all about, is that sense of problem solving, creative thinking, and so on and so forth, where we actually also as a team can sit down and saying, what are we solving? Are we solving the right problem? Yes. And what do we need so that we can get there? And so what I hear from is like people that are in very high pressure situations, they actually get back to me and say, power pausing has made me more effective because pausing is making me master my attention and my better.
Makes total sense. And I actually relate with that because when I see this all the time in my leadership workshops when I'm doing them, and especially there was one we were doing it with the resort managers, and you have guests and you have clients and they're coming and sometimes they're upset and you have to think on the spot. But when I recently worked with a group of managers who proudly told me, by the way, that they were doing all the right things. They had the morning routines, they had the meditation apps, they even had gratitude journals, right? All the stuff that we've been talking about. And yet they were exhausted. Not because they weren't disciplined, but because their inner dialogue at work was still relentless. There was no space between the stimulus and the response. So no breathing room to choose differently. So what shifted things wasn't adding another habit. It was helping them arrive in the moment and notice how they were operating under pressure. Yeah. Kind of what you're saying, that changes everything. That pause and that arriving in that moment. What your dad said also. Yeah. What are you chasing? Where are you going? What's wrong with this moment? And why can't we fully be there and then take a response to whatever is coming to us? So I absolutely love that. And it totally resonates with me. Now, one of my favorite tools in your book is the CARE framework, because I think it teaches people how to ask better questions, especially in high pressure environments that we're talking about. So can you share the framework with our listeners and walk us through a real workplace example where CARE transformed a conversation or a decision so they can see how it was applied?
Yeah. So I think of it as like the CARE framework actually overlaps with those three aspects of self, others, and work as well. Yes. And so when we're talking about self, the CARE framework is the C is, what is the communication that's going on in my head? What are the thoughts I'm having? Am I having all the why can't I thoughts? And how can I then shift that? So instead of being my own inner critic, I be my own inner coach. That's the first step of the CARE framework. We have to start with self if we want to have better conversations with others, because the conversation we're having with ourselves would overflow into the conversation with other people. Right. So we always start with self before we engage with others. It's like, it seems so logical, but we often don't have that in our sort of learnings, right? And the things I've always said is we should learn this as kids. Like this would be great to teach to kids.
That's whole another conversation.
Have a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's like a whole another conversation. I can keep talking about it.
Because I learned these things. My dad was forcing me to become more self-aware as a child by pausing and asking questions and asking me to reflect on what was it that was going on in me that made X, Y, and Z. Right? He would never yell at me for doing the wrong thing. He would ask me questions about what was it that happened. Anyway, so that's the inner conversation is the C when we're talking about self. The second is the A, is the awareness, which again overlaps with the power pausing, right? It's the awareness. How do I become more aware of how I'm feeling in there? And then the R is taking responsibility for that, which is similar to your framework as well, right? It's like, how do we take responsibility for it? Because we tend to say, I can't because what can you do, right? So if we're shifting it around again and saying a lot of times we outsource our power a lot. We really do. And especially in our world today with technology, once again, we outsource our power to wearables and things like that. I wear a ring and whatever to give me information and data, but I don't make it control my choices. It's so that I can make informed choices. So again, we have to make sure we take responsibility for the relationships, because everything in the world, everything in our lives is a relationship. I have a relationship with my phone. I have a relationship with my technology. I have a relationship with everything, right? Everything is a relationship. I have a relationship with food. I have a relationship with work colleagues. Everything is a relationship as far as I see it. And then E is, how do I express it in a way that I ask for what I need? How can I say, this is what I need? How can I communicate it in a way that makes sense to other people? And I always say, tell people why you need it, instead of just saying, I need this. We have this we think everything is a battle, but it's really about understanding that boundaries isn't a defense system. A lot of people think of boundaries as a defense system. I think of it as an understanding of capacity. And so we can say, I need this so that I can, because I want to. So it could be, I need 5 minutes when I come home from work so that I can just shift my mindset, because it's been very stressful at work and I want to be present to the family. That's a way to communicate a need, instead of just saying, leave me alone, I need space.
And you're so right.
And so we can actually learn.
Yeah, I really think that is so powerful. And that's why it starts from the self, because if you are still ridden by your own emotions, you will not be able to pause and be intentional about this conversation that you're going to have with the other person, and actually spell out your why. That is so powerful as well, because then the other person knows why you're asking for it and what does it mean for you. And I cannot even think of one scenario where if you respond this way, the other person is not going to understand your situation or your position and would be more receptive to supporting you the way you want them to. Yeah. So I absolutely love this. And I still feel, and tell me if you have the same kind of experience, but many organizations still see self-care part as that nice to have kind of thing, not as a mindset. So from your experience, if you're talking to those executives, what is the real ROI of cultivating a self-care mindset at work for leaders, for teams and cultures? Because unfortunately, many leaders still see it as from an ROI perspective, and they care, but they're not present enough to really see how it's eroding their culture and so many other things. So from your perspective, what is the real ROI that they really need to understand about cultivating the self-care mindset?
I think the self-care mindset is just tools. It's having the tools to be at your best, really. Yes. And it's really about having tools and frameworks that allow you to identify a process or a system. I think of it as designing a system, designing the conditions for everyone to not just harness and unlock their best capabilities, but even discover them. And so I think of this as frameworks for us to do that. And if we think of it from, it's not that we need a self-care mindset. It is, what can we use it for? And what we can use it for is saying, how can people have more agent in their work? How can they be more engaged? How can they contribute better? What are the things that can help them show up in a way that essentially is how they want to show up? It's not like you have to show up this way. We have to engage people. We have this idea that we have to force people to engage. No, actually, people want to engage, but they need to know that it matters, right? Yes. They want to feel valued. They want to feel that it made a difference. Even if you're stacking the shelf in a supermarket, I always say thank you to the people who are stacking the shelf in the supermarket, because it makes my life easier. And I want them to know that they are helping me by doing their job, and I appreciate it.
Yes.
And thinking of it more as everything at work is actually interconnected. We're all in service of each other. Yes. And if that's the case, then maybe we can create this more of a coherence among how do we actually design an environment where it's okay to pause, let me think about that for a moment before because I just need to check in with myself before with you. Or if we're saying in a meeting, hey, can we just pause on that for a moment? That didn't come out right. Or we take it back when we say something and say, hey, I want to just reframe that and redo that came out wrong. And then so everybody creates this space. I call it space and grace, but space to actually allow for the human knowledge to not only catch up with this work, but actually being used appropriately. And to me, that human technology is our ability to sense something, to actually design, to evolve, to create, to think outside of the box, to have complex ideas and solutions for that. That is where our real human power and human technology comes in. And we're going to need that even more in the world of AI. And if we're just scaling AI into a system that's already running a broken system of hamster wheel performance, then we're missing the boat and we're breaking down the system versus redesigning the system and saying, we're not just going to add extra speed to a broken hamster wheel because it's just going to break down. What we're going to do is redesign the conditions for us to actually scale human capacity and human capability, which is how we use AI better, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the shift that we have to look at. So it becomes a different ROI than what did we get out of this self-care mindset program, but actually really understanding that a self-care mindset is part of our human technology.
Yeah, that is so beautifully put, because I think, again, even from an AI conversation, yes, there is a little bit of panic of, okay, the world is changing, what's going to be in 5 years, 10 years from now. But I also see that opportunity of actually using our human potential to what it's supposed to be, rather than being transactional and working as a machine and being efficient, and that's all it matters. Actually creating real human connection, because we are social animals and we are meant to live in groups, in communities, and helping each other out. That's how we thrive. So that is so true. And I'm really hoping that more leaders really understand that dynamic, that there is this great opportunity to actually amplify our human side and our human potential that we are not amplifying right now or even utilizing fully right now. So that's amazing. Now, if I may, and you've already touched on this, decision making is another part of where I see a lot of leaders are struggling. So when organizations come to you, when they're struggling with this decision fatigue and disengagement and friction in their teams, and do you have any tip that you have shared with these leaders which has helped them, of course, with the power pausing, to slow down, but when they don't have enough time and they feel they need to really act quickly, like what are some of the things they can do to make sure they're making better decisions?
But that's again where that mindset comes in, that we don't have time to pause, right? But yes, we don't have time not to, because we need to solve the right problem the first time. And it's a deeper conversation about this shift of the mindset that says that how we create results is by being faster. And I don't think that's going to hold up in the future of work, because we're not going to be faster. We have to be high functioning in that. I think we need to rethink high performance as pressure and faster, and think of it as presence and high functioning, and actually really using our mind with care. So that is when people come, it's because they know that they're scaling the wrong mindset, they're scaling the wrong system. That's when people come to me. And so they're asking me for help to redesign, or not redesign as in new organizational chart, but redesign the way we think of our human technology in the workplace and how it works better together. My background is actually also design, interior and space design. Funnily enough, apart from having a fashion background, an interior and customer experience background, I also have a design background. Wow. So I actually can design spaces to optimize human, like our technology. I actually can. Yes. And to be honest, I have thought about maybe I should get back into that. But they're designing the environment to work better together by designing first, how do we optimize our own capabilities, and how does that then have a ripple effect throughout the organization? So it's not just like a 1 hour process. It's more of an ongoing process of shift and change and really rethinking the old paradigm so we can build the paradigm, whatever that looks like in the future of work, because I don't think we're completely clear of what the future of work will look like. And that's where I also say we have to pause more and actually make choices about what do we want it to like? How are we going to shape the future of work with the choices we make today? And I think that's a good question and a discerning possibility and complex problem we have to solve.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Our choices today, what we are doing today, is going to shape our future. So we got to be more intentional about that. And all of us, not one person. And that's why I think these conversations really light up my day, because I feel like none of us can do this alone. There's a big undertaking. There's a pivot that needs to happen. And each of us is bringing some light, some perspective to that conversation. And it's only can be done if we work on this together as a community to look at the future for our kids, for their kids, right? What is the legacy we are leaving behind, and what are we really doing for human sustainability also, along with all the technological advancement, which is great. None of that is bad if we know how to use it by anchoring within. So that brings me to... yeah, go ahead.
I always say people might think of me as like somebody asked me the other day and they said, oh, so you're not actually saying we have to go back to being human. I was like, no, we have to go forward to actually become the humans we can become. Because I'm actually, I'm such a techie. I keep saying I'm a boomer with a Gen Z mindset because I love technology. And I think we need to look at the possibilities instead of who can we become, instead of saying we have to go back. No, we don't. We have to go forward.
That makes sense.
Always have to go forward.
Yep. So since we're talking about choices of today, what I have noticed across organizations, and I'm sure you have too, is that burnout rarely comes from workload alone. It comes from leaders feeling they don't have a choice, right? So that's one of the reasons I teach the ATM framework, which is one of the ways it actually amplifies your empowerment to take real action is, again, arrive, take responsibility, and make a conscious choice. So once leaders reclaim an agency over how they show up, everything shifts, their decision-making, their boundaries that we have been talking about, and then the overall culture. Yep. So now, given your work with power pausing, the CARE framework, and your own lived experience, and I think now I know what you're going to say, but I'm still going to ask you, which part of the ATM framework itself resonates most with you right now? So out of those 3 steps, which one resonates with you?
I actually don't think that one alone does it, because I think it's a process, just because the ATM framework very much overlaps with power pausing and the 3 stages, or you could argue it overlaps with my AAA, which we didn't discuss, but my AAA is about being aware, acknowledge how we feel, and then ask what do we need so that we can. So I think it's similar, and I think we're very aligned in that way, that we're saying for us to take action, we have to start within. That's what we're both saying, right? It's nothing happens on the outside if it doesn't change on the inside. That's what we're both saying, and I think that's where we're really aligned in that, right? So I don't think that I can say, this part of the ATM is a brilliant way of what are we withdrawing and what are we putting in, and where's it coming from, and we both have this perspective that it starts within. And I agree with you. I actually have seen it over and over again. We don't burn out, we don't just burn out from working too much. We burn out from worrying too much and feeling that we don't matter, which is also relative to not having choice, which is that sense of agency. Again, I will always argue that we have choice.
Yes.
I will argue that. However, we must be willing to take the consequences for our choices.
That's right. I love that. Thank you so much.
And that's where we need to take that ownership back.
Yep. Yep. Jeanette, I can keep talking with you. We believe in this stuff so much, and we have been teaching this for so many years and actually applying in our own lives. But so what is one message or tip you would like to share with our audience today who is hustling harder every day, looking to bring more joy, success, and fulfillment into their lives? What is one thing they can take away from today that they can start doing starting today?
To cultivate trusting yourself. Self-trust is so important for us to feel empowered and to actually take action. And without it, we get stuck on the hamster wheel of overthinking, not taking action, and so on and so forth. Start cultivating that sense of self-trust, and whatever that looks like for you. That might look like I need to go for a walk so I can listen to myself in a different perspective than try and push harder through something. Because as I often say, we try to think it through rather than feel it through. You can feel it through a little bit more. And learning how to trust that signal that our body is trying to give us, because we are a full sensory system. That is our human technology. Learning to trust that and listen to that is the most essential step we can take for self-empowerment.
So powerful. Thank you so much for this actual, real human connection and conversation. How can our audience reach out to you to bring your work into their life and organizations?
Thank you for that question. My name is Jeanette Bronee. That means I am also the only person in the world with that name. I cannot hide. So you can find me anywhere. LinkedIn, Jeanette Bronee, and my website is Jeanette Bronee. Connect with me and say hi and share some of your experiences. I'd love to hear how, and if you get the book, send me a note and say you got the book, or tell me what are some of your favorite parts of it, and maybe write a review.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and we'll have all those information in the show notes as well. And as Jeanette, this conversation reinforces something we talk about often here on Her Boss Brain. Burnout isn't a capacity issue. It's an agency issue. We don't burn out because we care too much. We burn out because somewhere along the way, we stop caring for ourselves while caring for everything else. And like Jeanette said, it's about, and I have written down here, and I'm going to actually use this, about caring about your people rather than caring for your people. Self-care isn't stepping away from leadership. It's how we lead better from within. So for everyone listening, here's your invitation. Before your next meeting, before your next difficult conversation, before your next automatic yes, pause. Arrive in the moment. Take responsibility for how you show up, make a conscious choice. That's how you stop making unconscious withdrawals and start making intentional deposits into your inner ATM. And when you do that consistently, you activate your boss brain, the part of you that can stay grounded under pressure, think clearly, communicate with intention, and lead with confidence without burning out. And that's how you move from survival mode to self-leadership, which we both have been talking about today. From running on empty to leading with energy, clarity, and care. So if this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share this episode with a leader or manager who needs permission to stop pushing through and start leading from within. And if you're ready to go deeper to learn how to make conscious withdrawals from your inner ATM and activate your boss brain in your daily leadership, stay connected with us here on Her Boss Brain, where we turn inner awareness into real leadership action. Because when you lead from within, you don't just perform better. You create impact, influence, and a work-life quality that actually lasts. I am so thankful for Jeanette to join us today and give us such powerful, impactful nuggets and wisdom that you have shared with us, her personal story, her wisdom, and I cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much, and take care, everyone. I'll see you next time.
So that's it for today's episode of Her Boss Brain podcast. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes will win a chance in a grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 private VIP day with Pallavi herself. Be sure to head on over to herbossbrainpodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Pallavi's gift and join us next time.